Broad Pod.
Hello, listeners. Thank you so much for joining me on this 60th edition of the Teaching Abroad Pod. I'm your host, Rowan Lomas, and joining me this week is Oxford Seminars graduate Mitra Alizadeh, who says taking the TESL course, quote, forever changed the trajectory of her life. According to a colleague, his words, not mine, but nonetheless, I do want to hear all about this. But first, a little bio. Mitra has an honors degree with a double major in psychology and environmental science from York University in Toronto, and is TESL, TESL, TEFL certified from Oxford Seminars. She's worked for many years in the banking and project management fields, but more recently as an educator, college instructor, online teacher, and education manager. Welcome to the pod, Mitra.
Thank you, Rowan. Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you. I can't wait to hear all about your experience since you got your certificate. I guess the big question is, how did getting TESL certified change the trajectory of your life?
Those are verbatim my words. I did say those to Roger when I called in to get my certification PDF emailed to me. And I mean it. I have worked in education for a long time, 17 years now. I had worked always on the side in education, even when I was a nonprofit, until it became my full-time gig in 2016. When I got the lovely opportunity to work in Beijing, it was because the decades of experience I had in teaching on the side, in addition to other stuff that they liked, my management work. And then when I got the opportunity to teach at Canadore College in North Bay, they offered me the job, and the only thing was they needed their instructor to all be TESL certified. And I said, no problem. Job was supposed to start in September of 2019. So I enrolled in, I think, July or August, did the program. Phenomenal. So I got the certification, and then I had the best job ever. Like, I don't know if I should say numbers. Should I, Rowan?
If you want. I mean,
amazing. I went from making like 25 bucks an hour to making 80 bucks an hour. And it was like, and once I got there, because of the certification, everybody started treating me differently, like professor this and college instructor that. I was like, I'm literally doing the same thing, the same planning, the same, but a lot of the skills were incredibly useful. And like, I remember doing, we were doing a lot of like mock-up classes when we were in the Oxford Seminar certification course. And one of the classes that I taught, I passed around a piece of turquoise that I had brought from Iran. And I asked everybody to tell me what they think of it. It was on my necklace. And people were saying all sorts of stuff like, oh, this is magical, or this seems like spiritual, or this seems like family related, or it seems like valuable. And I was like, yeah, it is all of those. And also the word itself, turquoise, is incorrect, because the name of this rock is Firouzeh. And the reason it's called turquoise is because it went from the mountains of Afghanistan and Iran through Turkey to Europe. And the French who were purchasing this called it Turkish, which translates to turquoise. And then it translated to turquoise. And now we call it color turquoise and the stone turquoise, and it's all incorrect. And it is an important piece to remember as we teach English or French or any of these languages, that languages are often incorrect and they're a misrepresentation of history. And if you come in and your language is Mandarin, your language is Farsi, Arabic, whatever it is, your language is just as valid as the one that I'm teaching you. And my job as an educator is to provide you with the tools to communicate your message, not to nitpick at your grammar and spelling. We will also do that because I want you to succeed in life. I want you to go to interviews and feel confident. I want you to write essays and feel confident. I want you to write books and I want to buy them. But my job is to support you build your confidence. And that has always been the case, whether I was teaching a student with autism up to college, universities, it's the same.
Wow, it's very insightful and very above and beyond anything I would have brought to my TESL class. I will admit, actually very thoughtful person. Do some deep thinking about language and how it relates to life and history and how we teach it.
Thank you.
How I learned a new fact. I learned a new fact about the color turquoise, or as, what did you call it? What should we call it?
Firouzeh.
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 Interesting.
Yeah.
Learn something new every day.
There you go. That's what teaching's about, right? Learning.
Absolutely. Lifelong learning. So you already had teaching experience, as you mentioned, when you took the Oxford Seminars course. What more would you say you learned in that course that you didn't know already?
I would definitely say the lesson plans, because I have ideas. I'm quite creative, and I find a lot of my teaching style is through learning my students and responding. So if I had a student, for example, when I was a VIP kid that I knew was really into basketball, like the class would be about math and we would run through the math in English for like 10 minutes. And for the remainder of the class, we'd be talking about basketball. Because the thing is, I recognize I learned English as a second language. I was an EFL student when I was in Iran learning English at the age of 7. And I was an ESL student when we moved here when I was 13. And all the language I learned was because I was in love with Nick Carter from Backstreet Boys and I wanted to learn all the music. And the second one was because I wanted to gossip with my friends and know who likes who. And a lot of my deep learning as I got older was because I saw my parents be discriminated against because they had an accent or because they couldn't articulate their racism or Islamophobia they were experiencing. And I was like, oh, I have to learn the language here. I have to learn the tools here so I can advocate for myself and my community. And like it has always been like learning English for me has been a tool to access my passions. And I've learned that as a teacher, I'm most effective in teaching a language is tuning into that with my students. So I have a student, Olivia, who's in Abbotsford, BC, used to be my student VIP kid. Most of our conversations about the boys she likes at school, but I know she's practicing English regardless. She's articulating herself. She's listening to me talk fast, and we're slowing it down. And it's phenomenal.
So you're tapping into the intrinsic motivation of the students, you could say, in more of a pedagogical sense. It was great advice for sure. Find out what your students are interested in and go there.
Yeah. But I guess to answer your question, what did it teach me? That lesson planning is equally important. Even if I have that thought that my student really likes basketball, I could build a lesson plan that step by step goes through it.
The timing is pretty important, right? You only got so many minutes. You want to make sure you cover everything.
Yeah. So, still using kind of like the step-by-step strategies that I learned in that class to still tune into the things that I think are important.
Awesome. How would you say, I guess, it affected your corporate or management roles? Did you incorporate anything from your TESL course into your later not teaching roles?
Yes, I would definitely say the planning documentation. Like these are things that I really love how thorough and detailed it was, both in the books and in classes. I loved lesson planning is a pain because it's unpaid. You do it on your own and you have to do it because you care. So some of it feels like a chore when you're in a classroom, especially at a college level. You have a lot of students and a lot of different needs and a lot of different levels all kind of bulked in together. But the same happened when I went to Small Land at IKEA, where I was kind of training and onboarding a lot of childhood educators with the audits, with the training, different departments and different locations, a lot of documentation. And I think it really set me up in a different way, in a way that I start to approach the boring stuff with, oh, this is necessary. This is a tool to leave behind even after I leave. It's been incredibly helpful.
Great. I see you've taught in person, you've taught online. What would you say are major similarities or differences you can bring to each of those roles?
I think online, because I started pre-pandemic online 2016, I went through the frustrations before everybody else did. And the frustrations are you could have a student in front of you who's not paying attention or taking their phone to the toilets or their mom's beating them to pay attention. Like all of these things happened. And by the time pandemic hit, a lot of my students were online in Toronto. I was quite familiar of checking with parents. What is it that you want for this kid? Do you want them just to pay attention in class? Because I can focus on that. Do you actually care for their grammar? Because I can focus on that. Do you care that they become lifelong learners? Because I can ensure that. But I cannot ensure something that you are not supportive of as a parent and something that is not being instilled outside of my classroom, right? If I care for your son learning math, but you think math is BS, I'm not going to waste your son's time or my energy. It's a lot of I would say collaborative with parents when it's online. In person is phenomenal. I love in-person teaching. Nothing is better than that. Just because you can really read energy and you can follow their attention and their eyes even. So
And you mentioned before we started recording that you actually got a management role in China. How long were you there?
I was there from August 2017 till almost March of 2018. So that's 7 months.
Months. And what would you say were the highlights for you of living in China?
The food and the people and all the friends I made along the way. I think very similar to the story that you shared off record about your stay in Korea. There is a community of expats that we are all lost and untethered, and we gravitate towards each other. I met one of my bestest friends in the whole wide world, Elisa Bozan, who also flew in on the same day. We stayed in the same hotel. We ended up being roommates, and we were colleagues, and we had wildly different experiences just because of our racial identities. However, she is one of my greatest friends, and she is from Petrolia, Ontario. So she was one of the only people from Ontario. I think the only one actually at all. So we had some like already connection while going there together. And when we came back, she stayed. And then the pandemic hit and she got stuck and couldn't fly out for years.
Uh-oh.
And now she's in Toronto and she's never lived in Toronto. Like she's in the same city as me and it feels phenomenal. Like the friendships for sure is a highlight.
Absolutely. Yeah. What city were you in China?
Beijing.
Beijing, the capital. So kind of Toronto like, but way bigger and better in some ways. Public transit, I recall, being phenomenal.
Phenomenal, like 20 cents and goes everywhere. And it's very international. Like people would see your face and I'm visibly not Chinese and they're like, welcome to Beijing. I was like, I wish I'm going to start doing this when I go back to Toronto. If somebody tells me they're new, I'm like, welcome to Toronto.
This is great. Are you doing that? Are you going to start a trend?
Yeah, absolutely. I've already started doing it. I've done it since I've come back.
One thing I remember about Beijing and being impressed with was just like how this amazing blend of the modern and the old, like the historical neighborhoods, the Hutangs and what was it? Hutang? I don't know. Hutang's so beautiful, so old and interesting.
Rowan, that is exactly what I said about Beijing. Like you have this incredible castle that's like thousands of years old. And next to it is a subway that like within seconds will take you across. And then there's like high-rise buildings and you're in Hutongs, but you're using your WeChat wallet to pay like a corner shop lady who's like selling you eggs. Like it's truly like unfathomable to someone like I'm from Iran, the Middle East originally. So Tehran is a little bit like that, but not to that extent because the big cities are very Toronto-like and then the architecture is outside in other cities. And Toronto is the opposite of that. There is no history really beyond a couple of, well, there is indigenous history, but like not one that like is like, oh, look at this like giant like castle or something.
Not as old, I guess. There's the distillery district, I guess, is kind of old. I don't know.
Like 200 years. I don't know, man.
Canada old. Yeah. All right. And how about you said the food? Was there any specific dish that you just was to die for, or place that you experienced?
西葫芦饺子, zucchini and egg dumplings, which I learned. I have a friend in Toronto that is originally from Beijing. I knew her before moving. Actually, she helped me like pick my Chinese name and all sorts of stuff. And she gave me a lot of like, where do locals go? Because like I didn't want to go where the expats go, but I wanted to know, like, she's a Beijinger, like her family's Beijing, they're like originally from there. She taught me during the pandemic on video call how to make it from scratch for Lunar New Year. And I made it 3 years ago. Phenomenal. It's just as good when I made it. And it was maybe not as good, but like I would give myself a good 75%, which is good enough.
You learned how to say it properly. You learned how to make it properly. You were all in.
Yeah.
And how much would it cost in China? Just give or take.
Oh my God. Like I would have 18 of them for what I think was $2 every day for lunch.
So if my memory serves, that's like half the price of a Starbucks coffee in Beijing.
I never got coffee in Beijing.
Good choice. I couldn't believe like, why am I paying
coffee every day?
so much for a cup of Western coffee and I'm paying so little for delicious dumplings?
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing about China. Getting on to your career path, I guess. Would you say you prefer your education management roles or your teaching roles, and why?
Teaching roles. I think we talked about this a little bit before according to. I absolutely am grateful for every time a director or an upper management has looked at me and said, you are so good at what you do, you should manage. And then I've always been like, oh my God, it pays more. Thank you so much. And then I'll take it and I'll get there and I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to babysit adults. I absolutely hate telling people what to do. I love hiring people. I hate firing people. I love giving raises. I hate giving bad feedback. And I think teaching is the opposite of that. Like there is intrinsically so nurturing and almost maternal about teaching, even though I say this and my dad used to be a university professor, but I don't think he would take offense to that. I think as a father, he was so nurturing and close to me. And he taught me like how to play basketball, how to play soccer, politics, geography, languages, poetry. And like there is something so kind in teaching because you know the mind in front of you is an open mind and you get to protect it, but you also get to open it up. Like I often have had students ask me things and I'm like, that is phenomenal. Let's find out together because I don't know everything. Like I can have all these books on my shelf. I have probably only read half of them fully. But there's no way I will know everything, but I will learn things with students and they are the biggest blessing of my life. I absolutely love teaching more than managing.
That's a great example of something that's really fun and interesting. Has a lot of professional development and personal growth opportunities. Is like just in my link classes, even yesterday and today, coincidentally, two different classes, two different students asked me the same question. We were doing a little Halloween lesson, and the question was, "Why do you celebrate Halloween? Like, what is the history of Halloween?" And I was like, "I have no idea, to be honest." Like that is a future lesson that we should do. I should research that and come up with some good information. That sounds very interesting, but I have no idea.
Are you open for feedback?
Sure.
I have a rule in all my friendships and in all my classes, which is removing the word should, because you said we should research it. And I have been taught by my therapist that it's rooted in shame. So it's like, oh, it would be nice. It would be lovely. I would like to research.
How about I will do that. I will
You
research.
will do, I get it. And when you do, I would love to come and sit in that class and learn with you. Because I think what I know of Halloween is it's Hallows Eve.
All Hallows
which
Eve.
I
I did
think is
read
a
that recently.
because it is like a pagan tradition from somewhere on.
Ireland, potentially.
That's right. That's right. And like I really like a lot of like pagan Irish practices because I used to have a TA in my undergrad who is now pagan and like I always follow her Instagram. I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. So I'm gonna ask her actually after this call, and then I'm gonna email you.
Perfect. Look forward to it. So back to the interview, back to our regularly scheduled questions. What would you say is your greatest joy of being a teacher?
Having the opportunity to protect vulnerable spirits, but also protect their joys and advocate for them. Because there are times that I can see where their parents' fears have become their limits. And as much as I understand that, I also want to remove those limits so I can protect them from limiting themselves and I can protect them from the world limiting them. And sometimes those limitations come from parents, sometimes it comes from other classmates that are not so kind to them, and being able to protect them.
I could see you having like a tattoo that says limitless or something.
I know. To have my godmother's name, but you know what? Funny enough, she was quite protective of me and she was protector of my spirits and she removed a lot of limits in my life. So yeah.
Some connection there.
Some connection. So you got it. I did get that tattoo.
What would you say are the pros and cons of getting TEFL certified? What did you especially like about your course, or were there any things you didn't like very much?
Oh my God, I didn't like that one time the teacher told me to put my phone away. I was like, I'm an adult. Just like, and I think I was arranging a ride for afterwards because I'm incredibly attentive. Like you can see that I'm not on my phone, but on the rare occasion where I will pull out my phone, there's a purpose for it. But
you'd be in trouble in Ontario high schools these days.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, you can't tell me. Just like I'm a whole grown woman. Like I don't take out my phone to like Snapchat people. Like I'm taking it to like arrange my ride afterwards. And it was a one-time thing. The pros, phenomenal. I met a colleague and a teacher who was already teaching English in Mongolia. So interesting. And she knew so much like philosophy stuff that I learned from. I met my friend Jessica, whose birthday is on September 23rd. She was actually pre-med when she took that course just for fun. She took it. She fell in love with teaching. She went to Ontario Teachers College, and now she teaches.
Nice.
There were so many, like we had a potluck on the last day where we all brought like traditional foods, and like of course it got me the best job that changed the trajectory of my life. Like I am taken so much more seriously by having taught that one semester at a college, which objectively should make no difference because I'm the same person, but it did in the world. Like unfortunately we live in like a capitalist world where like there are certain values assigned to and ascribed to certain things and certain labels and certain pieces of paper. And this piece of paper served me more than the $40,000 one that I got from university. And I may have intellectually had more freedom in university because it was a 4-year, but in terms of actual return on investment, phenomenal, unmatched. How useful this was.
Amazing. One of the things you said reminded me a bit of something I really enjoyed about just other educational programs I've taken that involved other teachers. Like I have found sometimes I learned as much or more from my classmates than from the course material or from the curriculum, necessarily from the instructor. Like just the discussion groups, the things you learn from other people's experiences and what worked for them. It's really valuable as well.
Yeah. Do you have any particular one in mind?
Well, I took my MEd from UNB, distance education, but the discussion groups, we had, public school teachers from the North working with Indigenous communities, and we had public school teachers from Trinidad and Tobago in the class and things like that. So just different perspectives from different locations, different student types, doing things all different ways, of course, because different cultures generally do things differently or have different learning styles or expectations. So yeah, it was just interesting to see things that ideas people had from their experiences that were very different from my personal experiences.
I love that.
Access to resources too. A lot of teachers know where to get information, where to get lesson plans or activity ideas and stuff that I would not have known about if they didn't tell me.
Yes. And I do love that. Like even last year when I was managing a tutoring center, a lot of like my instructors had already been in those roles forever. And they're like, oh, like there's all these like tools that you could do, like grade 11, grade 12 calculus and math, that like it breaks down the steps, and like the things that the students taught me or like the instructors taught me, I was like, oh my God, these 20-year-olds really know their stuff. Because like I'm like in my late 30s now. It's just like I'm not going to be on top of all this stuff, but somebody can teach me, and I love it.
Before we go, what would you say to people who are on the fence about getting TEFL certified? They're kind of like thinking about it, but I don't know if I want to spend the money or commit the time.
I say, call me, I'll pay for it. And I know that you'll pay me back because you'll make good money. Skip that flight to Cuba, skip a vacation, take this. You'll make so much money and then we'll both fly out together. If you paid for university, like, congratulations, I love education, but it was definitely more of a scam. This is an actual certification that gives you actual access to real jobs. And I had a university degree that I used, and I had jobs that were like, oh, you have to be a university graduate. But did I actually go into a job that used anything in specific that required that? No. TESL, yes, 100%.
All right.
100%. I feel like I could be selling this.
Yeah, we should get you on the payroll here.
Yeah. You don't want to say prayer for me. I'm happy.
All right. Well, it was great meeting you. Thank you so much for joining me on the Teaching Abroad pod. It has been a pleasure to have you. And please do come back in the future if you have anything new to share.
Yes, and I have a gift for you. Can I go in and grab it quickly?
Sure, go ahead.
Give me 1 second. Because you mentioned the hutongs in Beijing. One of my best friends, Alyssa, who I talked about, which was one of my highlights in Beijing. After I decided to move out, we all left the house that we were in. She moved into a little hutong that looked like this.
Aww.
And when I went to stay with her before my flight back home, she said her favorite thing is the red door. So I took a picture of it. I painted it. She has the original. And this is a postcard that I will send to you. So after the call, if you want to send me your work PO box or whatever, I'm going to send this to you because you've been to Beijing, and I don't know if you have plans, but the note is
the little bird cages, and there's even I went to see a show with a friend who recommended it. It was like this Uyghur folk band playing like instruments I had never seen before, heard before. It's kind of like off the beaten track. Felt like you're going into an opium den. It was so smoky in there, but I don't know. It's just this whole other cultural experience that you wouldn't have anywhere else in the world.
I went to Beijing.
I was 2009 New Year's around that time.
You got to go back. It's even better now.
No doubt, no doubt. I do remember that the air was relatively clean, I guess, because it had been around the not too long after the Olympics, maybe. So they had
Yeah.
like done this big project to get the air cleaned up, and it was surprisingly not that bad.
Yeah, 2008 was the Olympic. Yeah. And you know what? It's gotten even better now. There was a couple of foggy days, but they removed coal. So
Awesome.
that's the source. So it's wonderful.
All right. Well, thanks again. And thanks to everyone for tuning in to the Teaching Abroad Pod. We will be releasing new episodes monthly for the foreseeable future. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends. Remember, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the usual places. And if you have any great ideas you'd like to hear us discuss in upcoming episodes, please leave them in the comments on YouTube or email us at teachingabroadpod@oxfordseminars.com. See ya.